Yes, thank you both for thank you both for taking time out. Obviously, yeah, we're here to talk about Dark Match, which is getting its world premiere at Fantasia very soon. I guess starting at the beginning, what was it about this script and these characters that made you both want to get involved?
Do you want to lead on that, Stephen?
Geez, ladies first. Because I forget everything. So whatever you say, I'll just sort of go, yeah.
Oh, I see. I see what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, so the reason that I personally felt attracted to it is because I grew up wrestling with my cousins on Saturday mornings, and I actually think it's what allowed me to feel curious about jujitsu when that came along. So I've made a long kind of roundabout connection for it, but the opportunity to learn a little bit more about how wrestling works and be more hands-on in the process of uh, doing the fight scenes and stuff that are very particular in wrestling in comparison to, just this like the usual kind of fight choreographies we'll do in film and TV. I think that opportunity was a huge, huge draw for me. But also just, I mean, it's a horror movie about wrestlers in the 80s. Like when does that come about again? It just doesn't. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it for me. That was the basis of it. It's pretty straightforward.
My answer is exactly the same.
Wrestling
Um,
with your sister when you were little, yeah?
oh yes, it's pretty close though. I mean, at first it was obviously the script, which I thought was I'd never read something like that. Again, tying into what Aisha said regarding wrestling meets horror meets also super strong woman character being the character. I really loved that, being a strong female myself. And so I just thought that was interesting and it was very unique. The characters were different. And then again, for me, the attachment to wrestling has I grew up in Calgary, where the Calgary Stampede Wrestling, I grew up around all of them, the Hart family. I mean, there was Keith. Keith used to substitute teach at our school. Was it high school or junior high? So he's always giving leg locks because we are all like, wrestling's fake. And he's like, come here. And we go, oh, okay. And then so it huge like I still, and you can ask Sarah about this, she will attest to it. At night, I don't watch a lot of TV and films, but I do YouTube almost nightly. One of the things I'll have is some wrestling thing, like watch some stupid thing. So there's still this attraction that I've always had since like growing up around the Dynamite Kid, Davy Boy Smith. I mean, we used to see them driving to volleyball, the Cuban Assassin and Carrie Brown. We'd drive by and give them fingers as we drove by. So it was just it was that attachment that sort of came in with the script, and all that went with the script.
I think something that I really enjoyed about Dark Match is that, wrestling, I think it's always been seen as this male dominated arena, especially in the, world of like WWE. It's very much been, there's been women fighters, but they've very much been window dressing and the matches have been ridiculed. And it's only really in recent years that that's started to thankfully change. But in this, we've got the 80s and we've got Misbehave. She's already sort of forging the way for this future that has come. Was that something else that sort of really inspired you to get involved?
But I think that that's a good point. And I guess maybe I didn't go deep enough, but that was the thing is that when I was younger, it was all the guys and there were just like random sprinklings. You never knew when they would show up. They were always just kind of like a background thing. They would take a bump or two, once a year. When it came to the women. And I think there was like a pay-per-view option, but like as far as like really being able to see women wrestle, I didn't get to see that until very, very recently. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it was one of those things where like if you were a girl growing up and you were drawn to the fantastic aspect of that is wrestling and the drama and the performance and all that kind of stuff and the athleticism. You didn't really feel like you were represented, but you found a way to participate. Like that was basically me with my cousins. um But in this particular scenario, with Sarah, like we really got a chance to get our hands dirty, and to be a part of that and to really learn what it meant. And we trained with real wrestlers, right? Like they're the ones who taught us and helped us put together our entrances and our signature moves and like all that kind of stuff. And so having the opportunity to go back and actually fulfill that was incredible. It really was one of those things that like you only get it once you get a zero in a lifetime opportunity to do that, but I got a once in a lifetime opportunity to do it. So for me,
They
that
were
was
great too. All those trainers were wonderful.
great.
I was wondering too, from your perspective. Sorry to not to commandeer the interview. I'm just curious because from a woman's perspective, did you watching wrestling?
Yeah,
You're both fans of wrestling, right? So growing up as a woman, I would assume, be more aware of the lack of women than men. Like the only thing I could say with wrestling is I really didn't, because I was like J.R. Foley, who was like a little Hitler guy, and it was just guy stuff. And
yeah,
I really didn't notice the lack of women until women became sexualized. And that's when I lost interest in wrestling. When it
right.
became sort of, I think it was like Elizabeth, and when they started to be the managers for the men, but it was just always sexualized. And that was my first time of like, hang on, there's no women. Now there's women, and they're just supposed to be like sex. It was weird. And I was wondering from either of your standpoints, when did that bother you from the get-go?
Um, should I, Brianna, did you want to answer that first? Sorry, Kat, did you want to answer that first?
I mean, for me, I think the female wrestlers that I sort of gravitated towards were Lita, which was sort of like the early 2000s, and she was sort of a very sort of tomboy-esque female. She didn't necessarily lean into the sexuality side, the more sexual side of things. And I think that was what I sort of gravitated towards. I didn't necessarily want to, because they used to have bra and panties matches, and it got pretty
Yeah.
bleak for a long time there for women. So yeah, it definitely was. There was
And you
a
feel
different,
embarrassed. Like I felt embarrassed as a man. I'm
yeah.
like, well, this isn't, it's, no more than all guys cat calls and their pigs. It's just like it represents just them, but it's gross.
I think that I kind of maybe skipped that period because I was, quite young. So I'm talking about like late 80s, early, oh God, I'm dating myself now, but like late 80s, early 90s when I was, having fun jumping off the back of the couch.
Right.
And there was really nothing happening then. Like it was so sparse and they were just kind of like you just get blips of women even being around. So um I just remember feeling sadness that there was no one that I really kind of felt a connection with in that sense. And then when I kind of circled back around to it, I had actually already started jujitsu, and it was around that time where they started doing all those reality shows. Like was it tough enough? Was that what it was called?
Oh yeah. I
Was that
remember
the
that.
wrestling one or was that the MMA one? I don't remember which one was which.
I
Cat
remember.
name?
I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah. So it was like a show where you could try out and, have an opportunity to learn wrestling. And that's where I saw like the reintegration of women. So that period of time, and of course I knew about, China and like that kind of period of time. And I being like a tall kind of statuesque woman, I remember being like there was an element of feeling celebrated in that sense for that physicality that I think I spent more time registering than the sexualized aspect of it.
Right.
I didn't
Interesting.
on panty matches by the just like I'm learning this now. So for me, it was kind of like you'd see these like athletic, strong women, and that's what I was paying attention to. And when I went into jujitsu, I actually came very, very close to trying to, with one of my girlfriends from jujitsu, Jessica. We thought about going and auditioning for the show, and I just kind of like lost my nerve. I just kind of lost my nerve about it and ended up training jujitsu more intensely instead. But yeah, and that was about 2010. So I missed that period that you're talking about. I didn't register that at all.
Yeah.
I
Because it's
also
so
like,
interesting.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say like what, because one of my favorite scenes in Dark Match that
Mhm.
I remember, I just forget shit.
Well, it
Um,
means, yeah.
is our scene together. when we
Yeah.
were in bed watching old me. And then
Yeah.
we end up sort of having this little wrestling match. But from the get-go, what I also loved is like you could kick my ass. Like, but I loved that. Like I respected that so much. And I also loved that we were able to sort of bring that into the movie of the,
Yeah.
and it, like to me it was, yes, you're a woman, you're just a strong individual that could beat me up. And I love that. Like be if it was a man next to me in bed or it just happened to be you being a woman. But I always loved that and I enjoyed that in the movie and I'm glad. And I hope that even that one little bit shows and helps reflect the strength of you as
Mm.
as who you are as a human, but also I think it also I hope reflects the strength of your character, if that
Oh.
makes sense. But that's why I love that scene so much. And of course, the intimacy coordinator, she was a doll.
Don't get me started. Don't do that. Gonna get us in trouble.
And
We'll talk about that on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely have to circle back to that. But I do feel a lot of appreciation and gratitude for how um I did feel like there was a mindfulness in you and a genuine kind of desire to have your character and play your character in a way that played tribute to the strength in my character. I sense a tremendous amount of respect always. That I think was interesting because your character was the or is the it represents like the pro wrestler, right? Like the big name, the veteran, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that it's interesting to see that you chose to play that character being so respectful and so um kind of almost leveling the playing field with Mind, who was just kind of like who was really coming up right behind you in a lot of ways.
That's
Um
what was fun. I thought that was like, because I think he was written, my guy was certainly written much more peacocky,
yeah, absolutely.
bigger, larger than life, gregarious, crotch grabbing, because especially because it was the 80s, we could have gone for that representation of that time
Yeah.
where men were generally, yeah, I can do what I want.
Mhm.
Some men apparently still can, and then they can become president. But politics aside, I was always really like I loved that opportunity to sort of like anytime there was an opportunity to, not you didn't need lifting up, but just to no, over there. There
Yeah.
there lies strength. There lies hope for our future.
Yeah.
Some guys like us, you know what I'm saying? So it was an interesting challenge that hopefully again you try these things and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but I do feel like that intimacy scene that we shared, I feel the same way about it, is what I'm saying. Like I got that same kind of vibe about it, and so I'm hoping that that plays as well. Yeah,
What
it
did
does.
you think? The scene
Yeah,
I'm talking about?
I definitely think it did. And Stephen, you've played a lot of bad guys, a lot of like henchmen and things. But in this film, you're placed as the heel. You're sort of placed of on the villain side of wrestling, and yet you're just a big old softie in this. I think it's quite nice for audiences to get to see this different side of your performance. Was that something that you sort of leaned into and kind of like enjoyed just being a bit nicer than normal?
Well, yeah, I mean, I always love, especially this was during sort of a slew of like maybe 6 films I did where I was really just, I mean, I'm an actor. I like to do as many different parts as you can. That's the joy. Some people have a range that is, smaller than the box in Zoom, and that's fine. Everyone has their thing, but I was certainly more interested in portraying not only as many different characters, but as many different layers in the characters. So take, like I said, this guy who was, could have been much more of a peacocker, and I think was written as more as such. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. How do you make that interesting? Or how do you make that more layered? Or again, how do you do something a little different? So it was definitely a concerted effort on my part, not to necessarily play against type or any of that, but just to give a little bit of the unexpected. You see someone like this, it just all of it always goes back to this Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I really have never seen the whole film. I've watched a bit. I saw it on stage in Calgary, but it's don't get strung up by the way I look. Don't judge a book by its cover. So anytime you can give a different layer, just as much as for a tough guy or someone who's a bad guy who can show another layer. Now that doesn't mean like if you're going to be an evil character, then I believe you play it all evil. I don't want to see shades of gray or some pedophile or evil person who's like, oh, but he's so sweet. No, if you're going to be evil, be fucking evil and play it evil. But with certain characters like this, there's opportunities to play, and that was important to me to show someone he was also broken. He was a broken man. So I wanted to show a bit of that vulnerability of a broken man and not play the typical peacocking male or, the ones who like still in London and Ireland, it's if you have any sort of emotional issue, it's let's have another pint, everything will be okay. As opposed to I'm sad, I'm broken, I need help. Can you support me? And especially in the 80s, it was sort of that. And so that was important to me.
And Dark Match, as I said at the start, is screening at Fantasia, and then next month it's coming over to the UK to screen at Fright Fest in the big Odeon Leicester Square Fancy Pants Cinema. Why should attendees at either festival take a chance on this film? What are they going to get from Dark Match that they might not get from some other films out there?
I don't think you'll ever find a movie like Dark Match. There's so much that goes into it. Never mind the characters, the storyline, the genre, that kind of crossover genre that Lowell decided to tackle. The cinematography is really interesting. I love the way that came together. It just feels to me like one of those movies you don't forget, and it just sticks with you. It's unique and it's colorful and it's weird, and it's wonderful. It's all of those things. And so I mean, for me anyways, that's what I love about the way that it worked out.
Yeah, weird and wonderful. That's
Yeah.
what I love, that it is something that you're not. And it's all what's interesting is it's sort of like we saw kinds of kindness yesterday, and I love Yorgos and I love his from Poor Things to his like early work, which this was supposed to be more like, and it to me it just didn't miss the mark. Dark Match has that weirdness without being contrived. Like Kind of Kindness is a bit, it's he feels like contrived a bit.
Yeah.
Dark Match, even though it's
It is.
ridiculous sometimes, it just works. Like no one, like even all of the acting,
Yeah.
it it's just works. Like it's a weird, wonderful world where
It's disturbing. There's something about it that kind of makes it right. Like it's got that beautiful kind of disturbing quality to it. That naturally disturbing in your body, kind of like
Yeah,
I think
it's like it's almost like Wicker Man-esque in a way. It's sort
yeah.
of that slow burn that sort of like seeps in where things gradually get more and more strange and the characters are just trying to catch
yeah,
up to
there's
that
like an
strange.
unraveling, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
like I said to Lowell, I was like, wasn't disappointed, but I wish it would have gone, I would have even gone further.
We totally could have. We totally could have. Oh yeah.
It stepped back a bit at a time where I was like, no, now you go full weird. Now you go full violence. Now you go, because then it makes that like the Wicker Man or like Midsummer, right? It just grows into this. But I think that can also then that can be very divisive.
Yeah. Alienates a lot
So
of
I
people.
think it was sort of to use a DIY euphemism, it was sanded down a bit to make things a little smoother for the masses.
We
I love
definitely shot some wild stuff when you think about like what we even the pictures that I have of our time on set together,
Oh
it
my.
really like oh my God, like just like wild
And
time.
just the amount of blood, like I was
Oh,
doing that too, because I was going to do like an Instagram post of like, I've got another film at Fantasia, so I was going to do this sort of like two films at Fantasia, and I was on the Peloton, just trying to find the dates because I don't organize my photos, and then yeah, looking at them and the time in the van.
oh my gosh, the van. I forgot about the van.
And Jonathan, I can't wait. His laugh
I
brings
know.
me so much joy.
Oh,
And
he
Sarah's
killed
never
it.
met him. So
Oh,
I'm just like, I just can't, well, like, I'll just wet myself when he laughs because,
because he's just great. But like him as Rusty, he nailed Rusty was just I think Rusty's my favorite character. I really, really do. He really, really, really executed Rusty in such a great way. Like knowing Jonathan, you know what I mean?
yeah.
I don't know. I love the character. I think that he really kind of played this conflicted problematic person really well. Comical, but also tragic. You know, I don't know. I really I loved how Jonathan handled that.
I mean,
Sarah,
everyone really did it.
buddy, yeah, I was
And
gonna
even
say.
like Chris,
Oh
Chris,
yeah,
no, we've a lot of mutual friends, but we never met. And I just remember that first
that first
day on
day.
set. And I was certainly curious of like, because athletes can
One.
make like they have the like I come from an athletic background too. The commitment, uh,
Mm-hmm.
focus can really help acting, but it
He's
doesn't necessarily make you a good actor. But Chris was when he was up there and doing that first scene, and basically, afterwards went up and not that like who am I to say anything, but I just was like, man, that's I had to admit. I know this, it's sort of like saying to someone, you look beautiful today. It makes you think, what did I look like yesterday? And I said, I'm not saying this to make it sound like I expected shit, but I was curious as to what you
how this
could
would
do.
go.
And he brought it. And I was like, whew, thank
Yeah,
God.
I mean, but you're right though. Like he showed up prepared. He was so focused. He had his binder, and he was also very humble and very personable. I remember being surprised by that. Like the same way that you were kind of like, what's it going to work out to on like performance wise? I was a little bit curious about what it was going to have look like to have the one actual world like internationally known wrestler in the room, you
Yeah.
know, on this set with us, and he was just like you would never know if you didn't know who he was, you would never guess that he's like the most well-known person in the room. He was just so kind and so generous and so patient and just focused and just was there to do some work. And he was he was terrifying. He was
Yeah.
terrifying. You know, I got to do a fight scene with him, and um I mean, first of all, I feel like just so lucky to have had the opportunity to do that. But he was genuinely when he would look at me and give me like those looks, like he was just possessed and you know, blood coming out of every it was terrifying. It was something else. And then to have him just be like this super kind, sweet, gentle person was like it was impressive. Yeah.
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 I
He's
can't wait for everyone to get a chance to see it. So I've actually got people outside of yourselves to talk to it about. So I wish you guys the best of luck with the premieres. And if you guys are at Fright Fest, I'll see you there.
Awesome. Thank you.
lovely. Thank you.